So what is it that? So this is what we.
Let me tell you something.
All right, guys, welcome everyone. Welcome. It's good to see y'all's faces. Good to hear y'all. This is the Farm Plug podcast, and we're here to educate, thrive, and connect with you all. I'm Camper K. I am a nature enthusiast. I'm a recreation lover, a water lover. I'm an international student, student of the earth, lover of nature and all things beautiful. And this is my partner.
Oh, what's good, everybody? Cando, the Farm Plug, checking in live from Chicago, doing cool stuff. We like outdoors, we like family, we like food, and we fuck with the earth. So this podcast, the Farm Plug podcast, is not your traditional podcast, right? It's an interactive, deliberative dialogue. So it focuses on intersectionality, ecology, and Afro futurism. So you're gonna notice we have a couple of questions outlined, but we're gonna all have a conversation. So we have some guiding questions, but we want everyone to contribute because the perspective is important, and that's how we capture that intersection. Afro-futurism. So at the end of every episode, we're gonna ask something about the future. What do you think about moving forward? And so today, our letter of the day is G. And G is for
globalization. Audience members, feel free to jump in real quick.
I'm excited. G for globalization. That's what I'm talking about.
Yes. It's been a long time coming. We're so excited we got into G. All of our other episodes are on our YouTube page, so if you haven't seen them, definitely go check those out. Our little audience seems to grow each time, so I'm glad to hear from you. Carolyn, where you say are you in DC right now?
Yeah, I'm right outside DC, in Maryland, just over the line, in Tacoma Park. So that's where I'm at, where I grew up.
Oh, nice. Okay. Locals.
Yes.
Right. I'm in Texas. Cando's in Chicago. Sarah's in Costa Rica. Darren, you're in Chicago as well, right?
I said, yeah, I'm sorry, Chicago.
Yeah, what's up?
Well, let's go into the news. You can kick it off with your news segment.
All right, yeah, I'll lead into the news real quick. It's super small. It's technically not even environmental based, but since we're talking about globalization, I feel like we're talking about products, we're talking about the movement of products, we're talking about where things originate. So the news that I wanted to bring up today is Biden's executive order to end contracts with private prisons. I feel like that's really important because a lot of times people don't realize where their products are coming from and where they're being produced, and that works, on your local scale, that works on your regional scale, and that works on an international scale. So I feel like this was a great, topic to kind of help segue, that conversation. And there's a lot of websites you can look up. I have a couple websites or links I can send to people where you can look up what products that you use are produced by prison labor. But also I want to mention about this topic that this is not an end all be all. I'm not a huge Biden hurrah fan. I'm not saying he is changing the system. I think it only like less than 10% of the people in prisons are in privately owned prisons. So this is, a small population, but it's hopefully a step forward in a way to get people thinking about, where people are being housed and what condition they're living in and what they're being forced to do and if they're being paid to do that service. So I thought that was a really important topic and I wanted to highlight it. How about you, Cando?
Yeah, so my news is centered around Bill Gates, right? This effing guy. I'm so tired of this guy, but he doesn't go away. But yeah, so if you follow the Farm Plug Instagram, right? at farm_plug on IG. You saw a couple of days ago, we posted some news about Bill Gates being the largest farmland owner in the United States, right? And so pretty much he has now come out with a grant for smart farming innovations for small scale producers. And so if you Google that, it's the website is gcgh.grandchallenges.org. And so pretty much he is giving money. There are two different prizes. One is seed grants and the other one is the scale up grant. A seed grant is for $250,000 and the scale up grant is for $1.5 million. So I don't really know how I feel about this as being news and the fact that we can take this money, but it's also like he's looking to really, really invest into what looks like technology. So of course, technology in the agriculture sector can go a lot of different ways. It has the capacity to expand on the goodness of humanity, but also to kind of show how we can be trash sometimes, and like skip people and talk, we talk about capitalism and stuff all the time. So, and especially with us talking about globalization today, understanding the impact, or if you don't understand the impact that someone like Bill Gates has been able to have because of how much money he has. Well, by the end of this episode, you'll definitely get it. So, yeah, that was my news. Does anybody do any of our listeners have any news coming from where you are locally? Oh, come on, Emeka. Chicago is going crazy right now. These kids got to get to school. There's so much going on.
Yeah, no. Peace and blessings, y'all. I'm thinking because there's just so much. I just got out of a meeting that was an introduction to Robert's role of order, parliamentary, was it parliamentary, whatever procedures. So my brain's kind of like, but anywho, I mean, it depends on like what we're targeting. Like if we're talking about like ag and stuff, possibly. But did we have the show during the week of the inauguration, or no? Was that before? The last show was before the inauguration?
It was before.
Okay. Yeah. I'm still, getting over that, and to akin of what Kayla was saying about President Biden. Yeah, I'm still kind of feeling it around. I'm not really as political as I once was. So yeah, just waiting to see how our current president is going to attack the issues that needs to be addressed, and how that's going to affect affect our neighborhoods, affect our cities, our towns. Oh, yeah, okay. So this is totally like unrelated, but man, today I went to a City of Chicago location to get my sticker for my car, and there was an elder who was very boisterous, and she was talking to whoever was at the counter, and she was kind of giving her story about getting carjacked. Now, this is a very tangible thing because it's happening all over Chicago. Like, it's just a stream of carjackings. And so to the point that I'm, getting my sticker for my City of Chicago sticker for my car. We had a precious elder just kind of talking about this being in distress and talking about having things taken away from her. So, yeah. So, yeah, it's a little off topic, but still just, I mean, that's something that's affecting us here in Chicago. It's not cool. The demographic is like, young people kind of doing this, but they've been like, there's been a bunch of precious elders that's been like assaulted, and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I know that a lot of I did see an article about the carjackings going up, and people are of course connecting that to COVID with unemployment going so hard, still running rampant and going up in a lot of cases. And as it gets cold, you know what I'm saying? People are, somebody got to choose between breaking in your car and feeding their kids. Your car getting broke into is not really a conversation, So, yeah, it's definitely related. It's definitely related. So, does anybody else have a piece of news to share? We got like 3 more minutes before we want to hop into this conversation around globalization, which is going to be pretty good. So, the window to share some news is closing in 5, 4, 3, 2. All right, Kayla, let's get to the juicy stuff. What is globalization? Let's get it cracking. What are we talking about? G is for globalization.
All right, guys. If you it gets to the juicy. Yeah, I dropped the show notes in the chat, so hopefully you can see that. Let me know if you can't see that, but you can follow along, or you can go back and refer to this. It's just our ideas and what we pulled together. So, what is globalization? How do you define it? And the simple dictionary definition I pulled up is the process in which business or other organizations develop international influence or start operating on an international scale. My definition that I just came up with out of my brain was the interaction and exchange of people, cultures, items, regardless of political boundaries. So, it doesn't matter whether you're geographical neighbors, us in Mexico, or you're across the sea, us in, China, us in Japan. It's that interaction and that exchange of ideas and peoples and cultures. So I feel like, that's how I see it.
Yeah, when I think about globalization, I think about the transference of culture, right? On a scale that is so big that it's global, right? So obviously global is the root word of that. So it makes me think of scale. I think international. I just think big. I think of like, when we think about like Xenon, Girl of the 21st Century, like all of those type of movies of the future, there's like a global government. Like everybody is kind of under one accord, and in the whole earth, I guess maybe it has evolved or been oppressed to the point of, I don't know. But when I think about globalization, it makes me, I don't know, I kind of just jump. I think about scale. What about?
Does anyone else want to hop in?
I'll be feeling like a teacher. I'll call your ass out on me.
What do you think? Any volunteers?
I'll go ahead. Yeah, globalization. I feel like, just when I hear the word, I just feel like it has like a connotation of, I guess, to what either I think Kayla you said or Kando, one of y'all said something about just like the global share of culture, and like resources and knowledge. But like when I hear globalization, it kind of like pricks my tongue a little bit because I already know what that means. Like as a Black person, you know what I'm saying? Like we, seeing globalization is like, okay, my kids love what's that band called? BTS. I don't know if anybody's familiar with BTS.
Koreans.
Yeah. Yeah. And so with BTS, if you guys, it's like K-pop. Yeah, K-pop. They got J-pop, K-pop. Basically K-pop is Korean pop music, J-pop, Japanese pop music. Anywho, basically when I hear BTS, that's globalization. It's like you're singing songs that is catered to a style that comes from rhythm and blues. And so it's like seeing our culture displayed by other cultures, I guess, which is fine, but at the same time, I just understand that when it comes to globalization, I also kind of think of in tandem vulturism. So yeah, so when I hear it, it's like just like it kind of pricks the spirit a little bit.
Actually, randomly, I don't know how many of y'all used to get the Scholastic journals. You know what I'm saying? Like in elementary school, it used to be something from Scholastic Journal, and it would be like these weekly debates. And I remember
in class, we used to have to pick a side. It was like an article that talked about the pros and the cons of something, and then you had to pick a side and say why you picked that side. And I remember globalization being in that journal, and I remember saying like, yeah, globalization is a good idea. And it was talking about NAFTA with the North American Free Trade Act, and the way that they described it, I was like, oh yeah, NAFTA is going to be great because we could trade with each other and support each other, boo out the bam. And the way that it sounded is just, in the article, I felt like it would be a good thing. But now here it is 20 years later, Candor, I'm like, nah, that shit was terrible. Like, well, kind of, maybe, I don't know. Kind of, maybe.
A little self-promote. I actually wrote a paper recently about the negative inclinations of NAFTA and how it's forced migration of immigrants. So you see these caravan of, which that's a trending news article that I couldn't talk about because there's another caravan of immigrants, not even from Mexico, but from Central America, from Honduras, talking about globalization, from Honduras, from El Salvador, from a lot of these countries that are farmers, and now they've been negatively affected by NAFTA, and now they have nowhere to go, which has been exacerbated by COVID, of course, and the global climate today. But it's really interesting because I remember that as well. But was another one of our audience members going to hop into? I don't want to cut anyone off. But yeah, NAFTA is great. You can dive into NAFTA so deep because yeah. But we don't want to go too off road.
I mean, it's a scale. Again, y'all, I'm probably say that word 1,000 times this evening. Scale, the scale. So just be prepared for that. But whenever we talk about globalization, right? I'm about to say Sarah. Okay, scale. She says, please do. Scale is so relevant. Yeah. So, Sarah, we ain't really heard from you, and you be going off. So, what do you think about globalization? When you hear it, what is it? What bells go off in your brain?
And I want to do a little intro to Sarah because she can be a little shy, but I want to make these connects because Sarah is one of our partners and lovers of nature and revolution, but she is also an alumni of UPeace, which we have another alumni of UPeace. So we're making connections. We're here to thrive. We're here to make connections. So I want y'all to know each other. I want y'all to be aware of each other's presence. But yeah, come on, Sarah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I always really struggle with introductions. But little blurps. I am a human rights advocate. I studied human rights law. I am staunchly anti-imperialist. I am a protector of the environment and believe in reparations and the land back movement. With that said, I just want to start by praising everyone in this chat. Truly, these are transformative conversations that will really elevate social consciousness and ultimately liberate us from hate. I have the tendency to rant, so please cut me off at any time. But this is such an important conversation because if more people dissected this idea of globalization, we would all ultimately realize how propagandized we are. Candace, you mentioned you think of scale when you think of globalization, and I just want to double check. Olusimeka, I hope I'm saying that correctly. You mentioned this like culture vulture that is absolutely the contingent on capitalism, right? Exploitation, but I'm gonna wrap this up, I promise. We immediately think of a global economy, right? When we think of globalization. And this global economy implies that there's some sort of interconnectivity of give and take. And we've been further indoctrinated by this through terms like free markets or free trade. And we have really internalized this rhetoric, which prompts us to think that the global economy is somehow lifting people out of poverty. And that rhetoric really allows us to envision a society of free people with endless social opportunities. And it's this idea that there's space and a necessary role for everyone, but ultimately we know better. We know that wasn't the truth behind NAFTA. You don't have to analyze NAFTA in order to know that at the end of the day, there are importing versus exporting countries. And what that ultimately means is if you aren't mass producing, you have to commodify your natural resources. You have to commodify and exploit your culture. And yeah, I'll leave it there. That's what I think when I think of globalization. But its origins is really through the free movement of people. It's the exchange of, Kayla, like you said, the exchange of ideas and information rather than commodities. And the word globalization has really been hijacked by, neoliberals and Western countries.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad that both of y'all chimed in and you alluded to that harm. I kind of wanted to start on a little bit more of a positive note. That's me. That's how I inherently camper K. I'm a happy camper. So I was like, let's put in some love, some sharing. But we're going to talk about that harm. We're going to talk about that damage. We're on question 1. We got to get through it, guys. But yes, I'm so glad. Sarah, you chimed in, and Omeka, that you both brought up that harm and that, negative and that take, because of course, there's give and take, but is that give and take proportional? Is it a back and forth?
Okay, no, I gotta stop y'all, because now y'all jumping all over the conversation. Hell no. Rewind. Let's dissect this. I'm about to say, let me pull y'all in real quick, because we gotta dissect this, right? So, we've been talking a lot about NAFTA. For those who may not know, NAFTA is the North American Free Trade Act, and it's talking about the relationship, the trade, import, export relationship between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Correct? Right? It's those 3 countries, right? North America. I'm going to make sure I'm getting it right, okay? And so pretty much a lot of when it was pretty much really romanticized right now, right? And so when we see a lot of these influx of immigrants who are coming from south, north, right? A lot of that, well, not a lot of that, because like you said, Kayla, some of them are coming from, Central America and even South America in some cases, but specifically as it pertains to Mexico. So if we look at something like corn, for example, Mexico used to have over 500 varieties of corn that were indigenous to Mexico alone, right? But as the United States began to mass produce corn, we started putting it in ethanol. We got high fructose corn syrup and everything that could kill you and make your life shorter got high fructose corn syrup in it. I can almost guarantee, right? So once we started to mass produce corn in that way, it became so much that we started shipping it to other countries, right? So when you have people like Bill Gates, for example, who owns the most farmland in the United States, right? How he's also really big into the biotech, into agriculture and things like that, which was part of my news, right? Him investing and putting up a grant to find people that are doing this, right? To patent it and mass produce. And when you mass produce things, you have the ability to produce it for cheaper, so you can export it faster, you can export it farther, right? And so looking at Mexico, back to the example, their indigenous corn, their corn market pretty much gets trampled because of the gigantic influx of United States corn that enters the international market. So if once we make all our corn and we harvest all of it and we can't use no more of it and we throw it on the international market, it makes the price go down, right? Because the supply is so abundant. So if it's cheaper, if that's the price and I'm in Mexico, I can't compete with that. So now I gotta sell my farm. Now I gotta take out credit. Now I gotta get loans and shit from all these other places that I really couldn't even afford to begin with because of other things that the United States had done in the past. You see what I'm saying? So this is just how things kind of trickle down. But before we get there, right, I want to ask you all, based on our understanding of globalization now, is it something that's new? And I don't want to assume that everyone is necessarily against globalization. Is there anyone in the conversation who feels like globalization is a good thing, or NAFTA was a good thing, that maybe sees pros in that situation? I don't know. Feel free to speak up. But I also want to pose the question, is this concept of globalization new? And I think, Sarah, you kind of touched on it But I really want to dig deeper into that and kind of explore you all's engagement with whether it's new or not, and if you think that is a good or a bad thing. Well, I'll start with you, Kayla. Is it new? Is this a new thing?
I mean, of course not. You know, the exchange of people and exchange of cultures, exchange of music. It's never been dictated by political boundaries or by countries. I don't think it should be. We even go back to the history of man, if you want to, and the Iberian Strait. People crossing continents. So the exchange of knowledge and people and items is not new, but this commodification of nature, this commodification of people and culture, which we see even in American society, how certain cultures can be commodified and hijacked and rewrapped in a way that's more pleasant for others and sold at a higher price. Like we see that, we're talking about scale. We see that, in the United States in our regional scale, but we see that on an international level. So of course it's not new, but I would like to say this commodification, this rapid, sell and take process that we see, that's newer to the industrialized, or after the industrial revolution and after colonization, and I would say the creation of the United States. But I don't want to take all the blame in that or give that to the United States. But also I highlighted that cornrows, the name cornrows, the style that Black people often wear in their hair, where does that name come from? And it's literally enslaved Black people, enslaved people from the African continent were brought over to the United States. And the first thing they thought of was to take seeds with them, So that in a way is a globalized move, not even thinking, like they never even knew what the United States or North America was. They didn't know where they were going, but they knew they needed seeds. So this exchange of, bringing one land to another has always been something that's inherent, I think, to people and to communities of people. But yeah, that's my little 2 cents on that.
I'm gonna say, Darian, what you think? Is globalization new or this shit been here? It been going down. Shit been global.
Yeah, I think it's new. No, I'm sorry. It's not new. It's not new. Shit been going down. I can't elaborate more than that on that, but
Would you see
Yeah.
positives of it as well as negatives? Because I feel like we talked about the negatives, we foreshadowed the negatives, but do you or anybody else see positives? We mentioned music, and there's definitely some negative stealing of it, but I feel like there's sometimes a beautifulness of building on top of cultures and or incorporating cultures. Or I see someone's hand up, so yeah, if anyone wants to share. Was that Kyle?
Yes, man. How y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm feeling good. Um, well, let me start by saying first, when I think of globalization, I honestly do look at it as a negative thing. And I think partially because, and I guess people can take this with a grain of salt, that I feel like being racist, in a sense, isn't as bad as being prejudiced. And let me break this one down for you.
Oh God.
And when I say this, I say it because a person loving your own people and loving or wanting to keep certain things dear to you, I see as not being a bad thing. But hating other people because they're not you, that's what I view as being like, that's the prejudice side of it. So as far as like people keeping their shit as their shit, I have no issue with it. Like I get in trouble all the time for my thoughts on fucking World War II and Nazi Germany. But I say keep your shit as your shit. And from there, you should just go ahead and, if that entails you doing whatever you need to do to keep your culture as your culture, I say to leave it that way, because if we look at history, when people went about spreading information from their people to the next, that's when the world started to fuck up, in my opinion, because we were too worried about, I guess, like, I'm not going to say the whole information, but we were too focused on integration, in a sense, like wanting to be accepted by other people instead of learning to love our own people. And once we focused on acceptance instead of that inner love, that's when I feel like everything went to shit. Like it from the beginning of time. And yeah, I'm gonna stop there because I can rant.
I might have some comments on that, but I see Natasha put her hand up, so I'm gonna let our audience hop in.
Hey y'all.
Hey, girl.
I'm gonna be biased and say that I don't think globalization is bad. It definitely can be a scale, but as a person who likes to travel, like I'm not gonna say it's bad because I want to see the world. I want to experience other cultures in their natural state. So it's a thing. So, but I think it's about scale. I don't really know. So I know last week we kind of eased into this because it's this recognition that we are going to influence one another cross-continental one way or another, be it rapid or over some part of time. Globalization is not new. Trade is a thing. We have just advanced in technologies and caused to do things quicker is more detrimental to the earth, right? Like walking the Silk Road versus sending a ship across the ocean is two different types of way to trade goods. But I don't know how to look at it. So I'm gonna tell you, I went to this conference once, global conference, World Food Prize, and these kids came over from the Netherlands, and it was real tragic for them because they had to fly and they didn't want to increase their carbon footprint that high. So before they all flew, they all planted like trees to make up for the carbon footprint that they were going to put out, and that made them feel better about their decision. I thought that was great, to a certain extent. Now, is that going to happen all the time when all people move across the world? Probably not. So how do you create, my question would be, how can you create balance in a global system? Like, why would we restrict ourselves? Why restrict yourself when you don't have to, when there is so much other culture to learn and explore?
Yes, I love that. Okay.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Okay. Also, I want to say she alluded to footprint, so I'm going to allude to our last conversation, which will be posted soon. We talked about footprint, so there's so much to be said, but I'm just saying the footprint of you flying versus Chevron's footprint. You got to talk about scale. But I know Sarah wants to go. I know Emeka wants to go. So, we're trying to get everyone in here. I love that we have so much participation. I'm so excited. Honestly, I love this. But Emeka, how about I saw your hand first, and then Sarah, and then Kando. I know you got a lot to say. So you bring us back on topic.
All right, peace, y'all. Yeah, just by hearing Natasha's her reaction, I kind of wanted to revise something I said earlier. So now, globalization, like the idea of globalization is great. You know what I'm saying? Like the idea of it, just like when Canada was mentioning the idea of NAFTA, the idea is great. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but it's just after, when it manifests and it becomes flesh, sometimes it looks different than what was written down on paper. So the idea of globalization is great, but because of systematic racism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it's just an off balance. This is always going to be off balance. You know what I'm saying? And that's my issue. So it's like, how do we find balance? Because like, I like traveling. I like other cultures, but at the same time, I just know that when it comes to Black and brown people, it's like everything that we put out, it's like, oh, this is great. This is great. This is great. And it was like, yo, you want to shout me out? You gonna shout me out? Yeah, sure, I'll do it. And then we it's just not getting the credit, not being overlooked, chronically overlooked. So that's what I mean. So again, the idea is great. The idea of NAFTA is great, but when put into action, it becomes something else.
I definitely agree, man. I'm trying to be quiet. I'm gonna just say a couple of random things, and then Sarah, I'm gonna toss it to you. Kyle, racism is bullshit, and I think it's quite primitive. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't think there's a justification for it. I think it's a waste of time. Honestly, all this time you spent being racist and trying to figure out how to protect your shit that you think is at risk, but it's not really at risk. You just live in a capitalist society, so you feel this unnecessary sense of competition. I think all that shit is made up. So if you subscribe to racism, you subscribe to your own oppression in a certain type of way. So that's that. When it comes down to traveling, I too love to travel, but then I think about the way that people travel, and it's not like real traveling. Like, some people say that they travel to experience culture, but then they get an all-inclusive hotel and never leave. So how are you experiencing the culture, but you never talk to the people? How are you actually contributing to that space? So it's a difference between interculturalism and multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is like when you got a whole bunch of, like, it's like Chicago, for example. We got all these different parts of town with all these different types of people, but they don't really intermingle with each other. There's no respect amongst each other. I don't really respect your culture. When I go eat Thai food or when I go eat Japanese food, I call it Asian food. There's no difference between Japanese, Asian, Chinese food. It's all just the same to me. That's multicultural. Intercultural is when we actually have a respect for the way that we go about exploring each other's culture, when I can like have a host family when I stay in a place and I'm contributing to local businesses. I'm buying from the smaller businesses. Like we say, buy black, support black businesses, but when we travel, we don't carry that same mindset. And so I think it's important to point that out, that not everybody travels the same way and not everybody values culture in the same way, so that when they do travel, the experience is not the same. So again, I'm just kind of building on, I guess, what Emeka was saying with the idea of something and the way that it's propagandized and the way that you digest it. Those are all very different parts of a process of globalization. And I think like that's, it takes time to kind of cultivate a respect for a culture. You got some people who just want passport stamps. That's cool. If that's what you want to do. I want passport stamps, but I also want to like be able to say I got people in this place that I love and that I know, and that, I know when I come back, I can kick it with them, like actually be with the people. How much time I have on earth to do that realistically all over the place, who knows? But Sarah.
Yes, this is such a meaningful conversation again. I really love this. I'm going to quickly speak to something that popped out at me that I think is super interesting, that we should all really have this in our back pockets when we have these kind of conversations. Natasha, you raised such a great point about travel and globalization, and you're absolutely right. Globalization is not new. But the idea that there's a balance of everyone gets to participate in the exchange or mobility, it's just fundamentally not true. And what I mean is, as Americans, as people with a US citizenship, there's so much privilege in our passport. And unfortunately, trade deals have a lot to do with limiting mobility. Because trade deals are often a precursor to stricter border policies. For example, with the case of NAFTA, we've been talking of NAFTA. Before the first 5 years of NAFTA being signed and enacted, US Border Patrol increased by triple. It tripled in less than 5 years. And that's essentially because you can keep people in enclaves, right? There's a reason Nike goes to Bangladesh and third world countries, because there's nowhere for these people to leave for other opportunities. And we're not on that receiving end of inequality because we come from a Western, quote unquote, developed country. And so it's all relevant. It's all meaningful. And I just wanted to share that one little bit. I'm going back on mute.
All right, I do want to toss the conversation to Kyle because he got the little crybaby eyes, like he didn't get a chance. No, I'm just playing. So we're gonna toss it to you, Kyle. But I also want to ask this question because I want to propel the conversation forward at the same time. is globalization, like we're talking about it, and I think ultimately it's like this phenomenon, right? So why does it even matter? Let's touch on that. So Kyle, if you could answer that question, speak on your point to NAFTA, and then why does globalization matter, if it matters to you at all?
Well, that's a hell of a question there too. But with NAFTA, let's just be honest about America and keep it all the way a stack when we're talking about this country. The reason for NAFTA, in my opinion, was not for, it was for drugs. It was signed in 1994, which just so happens to be a year for general elections in Mexico. 1994 is also a time period in which drug population or drug trafficking and things in the US, the numbers are relatively different. And if you look at the years previous or prior to it, it was a little bit uncontrolled. The US realized they could get some money from it, and drugs have been boosting our economy ever since. It brought us out of several recessions. But in that instance, I'll lead into globalization and say how globalization can be beneficial in that aspect right there. Cultures and their spiritual beliefs. And we'll use drugs because a lot of drugs were used for spiritual beliefs, which people partook in these drugs for them to get some form of enlightenment with various or whatever their beliefs were, whoever the higher powers that they were intact with. That was a form where it was beneficial. Food is kind of beneficial in that aspect too. But as far as when you tap into like the culture vulture aspects of globalization, I say no, because like I say, some things should have just stayed within yourself. Like some things need to stay at home. Everything don't need to be brought outside to be played with in the street. And that's what happened.
I agree with that.
Okay, but what about us already being outside in the street? I don't feel like I'm from here, for real. Like my heart is in the island. My heart in Jamaica in real life. And I think it's kind of a disadvantage. And I guess you have to go into the slave trade and then how you feel about that. And I know it's a lot of conspiracy around that too. So that can be one thing. But also, for food purposes, for people who live in areas where it's winter, where the land is not, able to be cultivated for a large part of the year, they rely heavily on imports, just to sustain life. I was watching a
But I have to stop you right there, Lakai. You know better than that. It's plenty of preservation methods to be able to save your food through the winter. Like that's I can't let you slide.
I
let you slide
that's something that's minuscule. That's minuscule. So what if you had to go 8 months eating only preserved foods? You might as well just die. You might as well just eat junk food.
No, my nigga, what?
Yeah.
You might say that you might not want to, but you can.
You can, but what is that? How is that going to look for you?
You got okay. Look, here's an example. I'm gonna give you this example.
But hold on, time out.
Right?
Before we get too deep into it, there are people currently. So you're talking about a shift to preservation, which is a total that's going to bring you a whole economical type work shift. Like what is the majority of your country? What are they going to be engaged in? You understand? Because it's the developed countries who are going to experience that more than the underdeveloped countries who are engrossed. 80% of their population is engrossed in agriculture, and they're closer to the equator. Unlike places like, here we are in North America, we get a long winter season. Canada, they get in these winter seasons. And I don't know. I think it's
look, G. You just that's what I'm saying. You confusing yourself because you bullshitting, G. That's what's happening.
No, because I don't understand. If we live in a global economy, why would we cut ourselves off? I'm not
saying cut yourself off. You don't have to. No. Why are you equating respectful engagement with cutting yourself off. That's not the same thing. It's like you love Jamaica,
So
right?
we
We
back
love
to
Jamaica.
finding
Jamaica got your
balance.
heart. I'm
Well,
saying
Candace,
Jamaica got so hard.
Candace, I think the term that we're missing, the key term that came up and what she's trying to address is scale. I think it's the scale of which, you know, globalization is working. And just looking at the food system and the scale of the food system that which we're in right now, I just, you know, I remember we had a conversation. No, we had a conversation with Dr. Grady Garrett, and she said, you know, small food systems when it comes to leafy greens, when it comes to your vegetables, when it comes to those microgreens, that's what, you know, you can grow at that local level. But when it comes to starch and when it comes to large scale agriculture, you still have to address some level of transport.
But what I'm saying is,
like
if it's starch based, but if it's starch based, it can last a long time through the winter. G, this is what I'm telling you. It's like you're tweaking. Like there are literally preservation methods. So how were indigenous people existing here through the winter time before?
Do we live at that scale? Do we live at the same scale that they live at today?
And there was no magic.
What you mean? I work in Chicago right now. You can walk down the street and there are so many vacant lots that you would be able to feed yourself. You could feed 160 people off of 1 acre.
I think people make the excuse.
What excuse?
Of like why we can't do it. Like now it's so many why we can't, but there are so many ways that it can be done. Like you can literally grow anything in your house in a water bottle, and people talk about they need dirt or soil to produce things.
Don't disrespect. Well, and so I want to say that it goes back. I mean, Kayla is exactly what you said, and that was my initial question.
It's scale.
It's how do you create balance in the global system? How do we find balance?
I'm gonna jump in. I had one of the questions in the show notes is, can you grow your avocado and eat it too? So this is a
I tried.
Question we're having, but
she did try.
I'm gonna let Carolyn jump in. She's a farmer. She works with small farm systems in the DC, Maryland area. She can give her own intro, but another UPeace alumni. So Sarah, Carolyn, y'all should definitely connect different years, but great people to know. But Carolyn, come on, give us your 2 cents. We haven't heard from you.
Thank you so much. And thanks so much for this discussion. Like, it's really been opening my mind a lot about all that globalization encompasses. Because like I come from such an ag perspective that I just think industrial ag, like monocultures, pesticides, like, but you guys are bringing up all this other stuff like travel and like culture that like I wouldn't necessarily like think of when I think of globalization. So I'm appreciating the discussion. I'm gonna have to jump in and back Kando up on this because as someone that farmed in Florida and then went to California and did some farming in Costa Rica, I was like, yeah, there's just no way to do it like without this temperate climate. Like globalization is definitely necessary to get all this stuff. But then now that I've been farming where it snows, where it drops like below freezing, I'm just like opened up to a whole new world of all the like abundance that you can grow all through the year. So I think it's really about investing in those spaces. I mean, you'll be surprised at how much food you can grow in an acre. I mean, and you'll be surprised at how much you can kind of keep throughout the winter and use a high tunnel. And, you know, a lot of vegetables are really, really hardy. Like we still have cabbage, Brussels sprouts. We still have like tons of stuff growing. We still have squash, potatoes that last all through the winter, just like Kano said. So I just want to jump in because I thought the same thing. Like I had the same assumptions about like, you know, there's definitely cash crops like, you know, coffee. Like we're not gonna be able to grow coffee up in New York or something like that. But, you know, there's exceptions to that. But for the most part, I think that we can create really, really resilient local food systems for sure. And we can rely a lot less on globalization in general.
I wanna open this up and I wanna invite Darian and Tay. or Mecca. Can y'all chime in on this, please, as urban growers in the city going crazy, right? Y'all, I mean, because I'm trying not to go off here, but I'm just saying it's a lot of opportunity that is everywhere to be able to support yourselves. And I think this is the key point with globalization. It's about exploitation, G. You can experience a culture without exploiting it. That's all that I'm saying. And I think that globalization and the way that it's practiced today is based on exploitation. So I think coffee, let's look at coffee, right? That is like a prime example. It can only be grown in certain places. So those places should get, premium dollar for their coffee. They shouldn't be exploited. They shouldn't have to depend on migratory labor. You know what I'm saying? Like they shouldn't be considered developing countries. Ethiopia, coffee was almost like founded, like it's originated out of Ethiopia. And Ethiopia is looked at internationally as one of the most poor countries. That doesn't make sense when you think about how many people drink coffee every single day. So why is that? And it's a paradox that I think doesn't have to exist. And I think when we make excuses like, oh, but I want, and I'm saying that's American privilege, you got to check yourself. You American, so you used to having access to things all over the world at all times of the year, but that's not the reality for majority of the world. So if majority of the world can do it, why can't we? But I did want to invite Tay, Darian, you guys. I want to pull y'all out because y'all been quiet, but or not.
Hey,
Whatever.
what's happening, everybody? I have a few comments on what the sister, I believe, Natasha was saying. It's been a preservation of food since the beginning of time. There's nowhere you could go that needs import, export food. Wherever you live, you can take care of your situation. As far as growing food, I mean, like the other farmer sister was saying, like you pretty much could grow whatever you want to grow all throughout the year. You just got to make the accommodations for it. So that goes into the globalization piece too. Like that's just exchange, again, piggybacking on what y'all was saying earlier, culture. Like you can learn stuff from one another, you know what I'm saying, pretty much, and utilizing your kit you already got, and you could push it further, you know what I'm saying? And that's just exchange of information. So you have to be global, yeah. Globalization, exploitation, all that exists. It is what it is. This a groove on the conversation we having. But on the background, if you got them people who making decisions, that's kind of how things go. Things are put together, you know what I'm saying, for the people who are in control to always kind of be in control, and they fight for blood. So, you know what I'm saying? We just gotta kind of, keep doing what we doing and keep your spirit and mind straight and work. Like, long as the conversations end in some type of work, then it's cool. If it's just conversations, then it really don't matter.
Okay. Pew, pew, pew.
Yeah, I think me personally, like as a farmer, I was gonna probably say just about everything that Tay said. We can, through globalization and sharing of information, we have been able to do a lot of sustainable things in climates where you wouldn't deem possible. So it can happen.
Definitely. I think that technology, you know what I'm saying, the power of technology, like for us to revel in it so much and to be like, you got a computer in your pocket, and then to say like, but how can we feed the world? Like when COVID, y'all, I don't know if y'all remember, but when COVID first started, there were images of like farmers rolling over their food because they couldn't get it to market for a profit. It was cheaper for a farmer to literally waste their food, to roll over and let it rot in the fields while people are starving. Do you see what I'm saying? That does not have to be that way. The way that we choose to spend our money, it does not have to be this way. And I think that that's a very real point that Tay mentioned, is that people, and I think all of us very well understand this, which is going to bring me to my next question, right? People in power don't just give up their power, right? The purpose of the boundaries that are set in this game is to maintain power, to maintain the status quo, right? So globalization at this point It is what it is. We can't really go back. You know what I'm saying? I don't think there is going back when, you know, the clothes that we wear come from different places. I think, you know, the food that we eat, like, you know, bananas, people are so used to having bananas, but, you know, they don't really grow here. You got to get them from other places. So, you know, we talk about culture, which is coming up in another conversation. So we will dive deeper into this word that we keep throwing around all willy-nilly. We're going to dissect that too. But my question to the audience, and starting with you, I guess we can start with you, Kayla, or you can go last. But what does globalization look like in your ideal world? So you are the person in power here. What does globalization look like, and how do you make that real? What are some real steps that you would take to make your ideal version of globalization real?
Yeah, no, I just want to say first that this conversation has been so enriching for me personally. It's been great to hear from all y'all. I'm glad that y'all are participating. But for me, I feel like we got to take it back to the center of what, you know, what Kando and I are about, what the reason we started this, and we're the Farm Plug podcast. So, you know, the number one thing we need to take back is, I'm not going to address that comment right now, Charmin. But
yeah, we should have voted for Kanye.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. We're not about to do that right now. The number one thing we need to take back is the food system. And I feel like the more that I'm growing and learning about being a revolutionary, about being, you know, taking back our power, taking back, you know, our ownership, it goes back to land, and it goes back to our food, and it goes back to, of course, water, which is a big thing for me. And water is becoming more commodified, which we mentioned in a couple of a couple episodes back. I'm a huge water person, so without water, there's no food. So, you know, where are you farming if you don't have access to water, if you're not rain fed, if you're not collecting water on some level? So I feel like protecting, preserving, and then gaining ownership over land, water access, seed saving, all of those things need to be the top of any revolutionary's list, because if you can't feed yourself, if you can't feed your people, if you can't make sure your people aren't starving, you're not going to be able to do anything. Period. And I understand what Tasha was saying about the scale, and I see the huge hurdle that we face when it comes to the scale of, you know, consumerism. Honestly, the consumerism of the United States has infected the world. We are like in an infection. We are a virus, more so than COVID, that has gone throughout the United States, or gone throughout the world, and has hints of consumerism and this idea of perpetual growth. You know, we have to constantly be producing. We have to constantly make something for someone to buy it just for the sake of making money. So this idea also needs to be tackled, because if we don't address the viciousness of capitalism and this idea of perpetual growth, then we're not going to be able to, you know, dissect or remove that consumer and exploitative nature of exchange cultures. Because I believe that we can exchange cultures. I believe that we can learn from one another, but it's going to be in an exploitative way as long as capitalism is the main ruler of our global, you know, society. So food systems, and get the fuck rid of capitalism. Like, those are my two takeaway points right now. Omek, I see your hands up, so I don't know if you want to slide to the audience, and then Kando, you can take us home at the end.
Yeah, no, for sure. Just quick tangent. Speaking to what you were saying about, you know, capitalism and how um, just connecting it with like people just in the vein of wanting to get money. Like a great example of that, I was thinking about how like you got a lot of people buying real estate, right? You know, which is, it can be extremely lucrative, right? But my issue with that is like, man, even though there's so many people like investing in real estate, like low key, I'm like, some of them need to like check themselves and just like understand that when you become like a landlord, like, with the intention of just making money, you're so focused on the money, you're not focused on the people and what the tenants need, to the point that you become a landlord to a slumlord. And we got a lot of slumlords, especially here in Chicago, especially and I'm definitely speaking from my own experience, but primarily I'm saying this to say, like, we're just to focus on just making money, making money, making money. We're not thinking about how our focus is in making money, but in actuality, when it's called for to express some type of humanity in your actions, you're like, nah, I gotta get the bag. I don't got time for that. And that, so yeah, I just wanted to make that connection.
And then we become our own oppressors. Exactly. I love the point. Thank you. All right. Any other audience members? Come on.
Before the next audience member goes, I want to reiterate. So we're asking, what does globalization look like in your ideal world, and how do we get there? So what is it, and then how? What are some things that we can do to get there, right? And also want to just let everyone know, at the end we're gonna have a shameless plug session. So get your 2 to 3 sentences ready to go, to let people know what it is you do, what you got, what you sell, what you offer to the earth, because we educate, we thrive, and we connect. So want to put that out as well. And also to stay tuned, because we got some hot conversations coming up for y'all. I'm not going to spoil it. Stay tuned to the Farm Plug Instagram to see what some of our next conversations will be about. But they are going to be lit, as you can see. So again, I want to open this question up. What does globalization look like for you in your future, your ideal future of this thing? And how do we get there? Or do you just not know? Is it fuck it? You know what I'm saying? I don't, if that's how you feel, don't answer. Like, we don't give a that. Solutions oriented. If no one wants to go, I will go. I'll say that for me, and I touched on it earlier, I think it's about intercultural connection. I think that's super important, and I don't think that can happen until people actually appreciate themselves and their own culture first. And so I think there's a mass, like, even with COVID, I feel like we've been given this huge opportunity to dial things back. And that's a privileged point, because let me not say that, because everybody has not been able to chill and sit down and like do some self-reflection. You feel me? But I do think that this is a time that Earth is telling us to do some self-reflection. I always result to go to your ancestors, figure out what your ancestors was into, have some conversations with them, love up on them, let them love up on you, and you'd be surprised at the answers that you find with that, because 9 times out of 10, they got the answers. Not only have they been here before, but they'll probably be coming back again, so that's just some wisdom to tap into. And it also allows for a certain amount of reverence to our elders that exist on earth, right? And when I say elders, I don't mean just elders in our community. I mean elder cultures, right? Elder ways of living, elder ways of operating, you know what I'm saying? And so I care about ecology. I care about, Lakaya, the question you asked, what does balance look like? And I think if people are actually seeking balance, then it's something that can be real. But I think one thing we gotta stop doing is lying to ourselves about people's intentions. Everybody's intentions is not to have an authentic cultural experience. Some people just want to authentically go somewhere and feel like they got more money than the people that they're around. You feel me? And if you can be real with yourself about that, you can then begin to ask yourself, why do you need to do that? And why do you have to go to a whole nother country to feel powerful and to feel dominant? And what does that mean? What do those attitudes mean when you come back home? How do you engage with people from these other countries when you're at home? Right? I'm from Chicago, and I've seen black people go in on, Mexicans because they felt like they were American and really had more privilege. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's in those moments when you feel like you're the one with the power that you really check yourself. Because when you become the person with the power, you have to check yourself, or other people have to check you. And then we end up in this fucked up cycle again. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the point, is to get rid of that. So, however you associate value to yourself, and, you do that. And hopefully that gets you finding value in other people. And I feel like I answered my own question. If we got
I think Sarah put her hand up. Hop up in here, Sarah.
Yeah, you guys, again, this is such an incredible conversation. Like this is really fulfilling. In my ideal world, there would be no borders, there would be no nation, there would be no statehood that separates us from them and creates things like a refugee crisis, a migrant crisis. The concept would not exist because people would have sovereignty of their destiny. They would say, hey, I want to leave. My family's not safe. And they would not be subject to the US empire, which really puts a limit on people's social mobility. If you were not born on empire land, then your social mobility is fixed. And that's the sad reality. And what's worth remembering is it wasn't always like this. Like you both mentioned this at the beginning of this episode, that this is the history of mankind. You know, the first woman came from Africa. Globalization, migration is a human phenomenon. It is a very recent thing to say, here are borders. You are born into certain conditions, and if you can make your way out of them, cool, but otherwise, you know, you're fucked. And so to me, no nation, no capitalist systems, no institutions that determine people's social mobility from birth.
Wait, Sarah, how did we get there? Do you have any tools? Like, what can we do? Anything? Sorry, not to put you on the spot, but any tools?
Yeah, burn down police departments. Like, not totally kidding. You both have spoke to having like local level farming and sustainability, and you know, in academia they use jargon like dual power. That is when a community is so self-sufficient that it does not need the government and it does not need any federal institutions, because there is mutual aid, right? And when you have that type of autonomy, there's no purpose for the state. When you do not have to work for the state institutions in order to keep them profiting, that's when you're no longer dependent. And when you're no longer dependent, you're no longer oppressed. Now, it's so much easier said than done, and I realize that, but it requires broad coalition building. It requires a social awakening that these are really constructs, and that the idea of my country versus your country, it's all relatively new, and it really requires a spiritual social awakening of collective humanity, you know.
Ashe, man. I do want to take a moment to say I appreciate all of you, because these things that we're talking about require so much imagination. They require so much vulnerability, and also being open and being willing to hear other people who, because I mean, some of y'all, and we coming from Costa Rica, Texas, Baltimore, DC right now. So it's so many different people in here and so many different experiences, different walks of life. And so this is how we actualize things, right? By being open and being willing. So I just want to extend a super, from the bottom of my heart, a thank you to all of you all who came and participated in this conversation tonight, in this deliberative dialogue, because, you know, being able to listen, learning how to listen is essential. So thank you. And I'm gonna toss it to Kayla.
I'm out here in Texas. I'm in the South. I'm learning a little bit more about community gardening, but I am a water person by nature and a big recreation person. So I love yoga, outdoor adventures, kayaking, rock climbing, all that stuff. If you're interested in any of that, hit me up on KYLA_PETE on Instagram. And I'm always willing to chat with y'all, provide resources, and make new friends, guys. I love you. So, Kando, what you got?
Kando the God, Kando the beautiful, Kando the great, Kandini the awesome, lady of the land, Kando of Kush, Kando the God, Kando. Yeah, I'm in Chicago, and you know, I'm focusing on healing myself right now. That's what I'm doing. But these dialogues, deliberative dialogues, is something that it's a group that I was a part of when I was at Tuskegee called the Black Belt Deliberative Dialogue Group, and we would create these conversations to kind of ease the relationship between Tuskegee University and the surrounding community, because it was really rocky. And for those who kind of, if you're on Twitter, you saw some of that commotion today around what that really means and how that resonates. But all right, it's just about 9 o'clock, so we are ending on time-ish.
Yeah.
So we have a cool feature video for you all. So Charmin, if you want to pull that up.
Green team, first I break the ground, then I till it up, put fertilizer down, plant seeds and sow it up, let it get some sun, every day I water it, watch out for pests and weeds, until I harvest it. First I break the ground, then I till it up, put fertilizer down, plant seeds and sow it up, let it get some sun, every day I water it, watch out for pests and weeds, until I harvest it. Go ahead, grow hard, grow smarter. Go ahead, go hard, grow harder. Go ahead, grow hard, grow smarter. Go ahead, go hard, grow harder. Photosynthesis, yeah, that get my plants light. Fertilizer and nitrogen get my soil right. I give my plants plenty water cause they need it. The roots compete for the nutrients, so I weed it. Try to conserve my energy, I might need it later. When you use less fuel, it makes the profit greater. I'm eco-friendly when I'm growing. Thankful for the sunlight and water when it's flowing. Shout out to all the bees and all the pollinators. They help to reproduce the plants when we need them later. On the farm we grow the food that we need to eat. From the vegetables and fruits to the fresh meat. We grow that fiber for our clothes and to build with. And buy a fuel for my tractor, let's take a field trip. It's Farmer Brown going green even in my city. Growing hard, got the green team with me. First I break the ground, and then I till it up. Put fertilizer down, plant seeds and sow it up. Let it get some sun, every day I water it. Watch out for pests and weeds, until I harvest it. First I break the ground, then I till it up. Put fertilizer down, plant seeds and sow it up. Let it get some sun, every day I water it. Watch out for pests and weeds, until I harvest it. Go ahead, grow hard, grow smarter. Go ahead, go hard, grow harder. Go ahead, grow hard, grow smarter. Go ahead, go hard, grow harder. Break the ground, then I till it up. Put fertilizer down, plant seeds and sow it up. Let it get some sun, every day I water it. Watch out for pests and weeds, until I harvest it. First I break the
Guys, that song, I bump that song like a real song. Like
It's so cute.
it's yeah.
All right. All right. Well,
Yeah.
that's it. This episode is a ribbon and wrap.
Wrap it.
Y'all had us lit tonight. Y'all had us lit.
Yeah, y'all were great. Y'all were amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all. I'm gonna just sit here and keep talking to y'all.
Yeah,
until y'all
we can cut the recording, but y'all can stay around. We can chat some more. We can be social.